Hello, how's everyone doing? I'm here with a bunch of special guests, two people that I don't know. Uh, their names are McLean and Sean, I believe. And we're
Sydney.
here. Huh?
Sydney.
See, I really don't know them. Um, Sydney and McLean, and we're here with special guest Walter Block. Um, I have delegated my speaking to these two who are going to interview Walter Block on my channel, so take it away.
Sweet. So, Mr. Block, we have a lot of questions that we thought about asking you. We probably won't get to all of them, but we thought we'd start off with, so me and McLean and I, argue libertarian theory a lot, and we have a lot of agreements and some disagreements. And one thing that we kind of argue a lot is the whole,
Like the Rothbardian, like eye for an eye, sort of like payment for committing a crime. Then I think I'm leaning more towards like where Rothbard stands, but Sydney.
So my argument to McLean is usually that I think when a person commits a crime, murder or whatever, even if it's murder or theft, really the only just compensation is like repayment, giving the TV back, and cost of capture and all that. And then of course Rothbard would add that you should also take his TV, or if you kill him, or if you are killed, then your family or state or whatever has the right to kill the murderer. And we a few days ago we picked up the Ethics of Liberty, and we started reading Rothbard's take on it. And in my understanding, he was arguing that because something like murder has no kind of financial value, then therefore you should add a second step, which is the murdering him back, unless maybe the murderer wants to like pay money for his life, like to keep his life. And I was kind of arguing that I don't really see, because I feel like the good thing about libertarian crime theory is that the victim is put back at square one where he was originally, and so no aggression is put on his pursuit of whatever he wants to do. But I don't see how the kind of payment of re-killing the person or retaking his TV is doing that.
Okay, I'm going to answer the question, but as a professor, I'm never allowed to just answer it straight. I have to go in various contortions.
Okay.
And the contortion I'm going to go in now is first give a little bit background as to how you two guys happen to be here, and how Daniel happens to be here. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but the way it started is Rich Legrade. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Legrade, yeah.
Legrade. Rich Legrade is your teacher. He's a high school teacher, and you guys are seniors in high school.
Yeah.
And Rich once had me on his show, and he had a whole bunch of his students. And you two were the ones who were really making life rough for me, asking me tough questions, and I try to answer them, and I think I did okay. Give myself a B minus or a B plus or something, and you guys didn't feel that I done enough, and you wanted to have at me again. So Daniel Rothschild was nice enough to host this on his show. Is that a fair statement of the background?
I think so.
Sounds about right.
Okay, so now that I've got that out of the way, and I have one more promise, that my payment is that you guys have to seriously consider coming to study with me at Loyola, because I'd love to have students like you, and I understand you're going to college, but probably you'll have pinko Keynesian professors, and you'll be sick of them, and after a semester or so, you'll come study with me and my colleagues. Okay, enough of that, and now let's get to it. What we're really talking about is libertarian punishment theory, a la Murray Rothbard, and I agree with Murray on this entirely. Murray has this theory of 2 teeth for a tooth plus costs of capture and scaring.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work? Okay, let's suppose I steal a TV from Daniel. Well, the first tooth is I got to give the TV back. But if that was all there was, it wouldn't be much of a punishment for me. It wouldn't be much compensation for him. From a utilitarian point of view, I would just keep stealing, and sometimes I get caught and I just have to give it back, and other times I don't get caught and I keep it. So that's not really enough. So we now get the second tooth, as in 2 teeth for a theory. which is something that I made up based on what Murray taught me, and he was kind enough to give me credit for this aphorism. Then the second tooth is I got to give Daniel one of my TVs of roughly equal value. So that's 2 teeth. Now, it's not 1.9 teeth or 2.1 teeth. It's 2.000 teeth, namely 2 teeth. The third part of the punishment for me, the stealer of the TV, is cost of capture. Now, if as soon as I steal the TV, I go to the cops or I go to somebody and I say, look, I stole the TV, I'm sorry, I apologize, here it is back, do me whatever justice requires, well then I didn't compound my felony of theft by hiding myself. Namely, I confessed and that was it, and there were no costs of capture. On the other hand, if I make it worse by hiding from justice, and you guys, look for me for 5 years and finally you capture me after 5 years, well, I got to pay back those costs of people who were duly associated with a libertarian court police firm, and I have to pay a lot of money because you guys have been looking for me for 5 years, and tons of hours that you spent looking for me, and I got to pay that too. The fourth thing, and here is the most controversial, is the scaring. Now, when I took Daniel's TV, I scared him. I don't care if he's Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're talking about the common man or the average man. You get scared. Your feeling of security is undermined, and we got to scare me. Now, how are we going to scare me? What are we going to do? Go like this? Boo? No. What we're going to do is make me play Russian roulette with a gun at my head, and the number of bullets and the number of chambers proportionate to how badly I scared him. So, for example, if I didn't really scare him too much, he wasn't at home, and I took the TV and I left a nice note for him or something, well, then there might be just 1 bullet and 1,000, chambers. On the other hand, if I came with a gun and I pointed it at him and I said, I'm going to take your TV or I'm going to blow your head off, well, now there might be 30 bullets in, 50 chambers, or I'm not sure about the numbers, but the point is that there'd be more of a penalty. So that would be the libertarian theory of punishment, and I think it's a very good draconian one. Draco was some ancient guy who really believed in punishment. We're not wimps, we're not wusses. We don't believe in violence, but that is, we don't believe in initiatory violence. But defensive violence or retaliation is very good. And the key here is not so much on fixing me up, I'm the criminal, not reforming me or shaping me up in any way. It's rather compensating the victim. Now, he can never be made whole, but we do the best we can. We're on the wrong side of the Garden of Eden. We're not in heaven. I'm a thief, and I've got to be punished. And the punishment consists of compensating him. And who was my crime against? Not society. My crime was against Daniel. So we got to compensate Daniel. Instead, nowadays, what they do is they put me in jail, in a nice, comfy jail with air conditioning and weightlifting and then psychiatric services, and the jail costs to keep me in there as much as Harvard tuition and room and board, something like $50,000, $60,000 a year. So Daniel suffers twice. First, I get his TV, and second, through taxes, we make him pay to put me in a nice, comfy jail. No. What we got to do is make me pay for this. And I can be made to pay for it. We have an institution that showed that you can force people to work hard and make a profit off of it. It was slavery, and what I'm advocating here is that we make me a slave, in effect. I mean, slavery is not justified for innocent people, but slavery is justified for criminals like me. So we make me a slave, and we make me work 16 hours a day, and we feed me gruel, and all the money that I make over and above the costs of keeping me alive go to Daniel to compensate him for this loss that I perpetrated on him. Okay, the second one is, well, what about if I kill him? I'm now a murderer. And I'm going to draw a little picture here. I don't know if it's going to come through. Maybe, hopefully you can see this. We're going to have a before and after, and we're going to have a victim and a perpetrator. And before, I'm going to make the victim with a frowning face because he's been killed. So can you see the frowning face?
Yeah.
And I'm going to make the perpetrator or the murderer with a happy face because he killed somebody. He likes to murder people, so he's happy.
Okay.
And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an after picture. And now the after picture is what we do is we flip this switch. And what this machine, sort of a Robert Nozikian machine, does is it takes the life out of the live murderer and puts it into the dead victim. Because in effect, what the murderer did is steal a life from the victim, and we're going to just make him give it back, just the one tooth. And now if people were had 9 lives like cats, then we'd make them give 2 lives up, plus scare them and cost of capture and all that. But we don't have 9 lives. We don't have this machine either, but work with me here. Okay, so now the second picture is the victim is now happy because he has his life back, and the perpetrator is now sad because he's been killed by the death penalty. So can you see all that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a great artist. We artists. So I think that this would be justified because what I did is I stole Daniel's life. Okay, now let's get back to reality. We don't have this machine, although probably in 10,000 years or in 1,000 years, if we don't blow ourselves up before then, we'll have this machine. And I think we should use this machine. And by help of this machine, we've now demonstrated, at least to my satisfaction, that the death penalty is justified. Now, I don't say the state should do it because the state can't do anything rationally or efficiently, but it's theoretically now justified, demonstrated that it's justified to have a death penalty. Okay, so let's get back to reality. We don't have this machine, but I stole his life, and therefore I owe him my life. Now, let's say he's got a wife and 2 little kids, and his wife and 2 little kids were dependent upon him to, support them. And now his wife, let's say that's his heir, owns me, owns my life. And what she can do is execute me in front of a lot of people and charge admission, or she could put me in as a slave and work me hard for the rest of my life, and the money that I earn goes to her and her kids. So I think that would be a justified way of doing it instead of punishing her twice by putting me in this comfy jail and making her pay taxes to support me. So I think that would be my Rothbardian type answer to the question of what's punishment theory and what about the death penalty.
So the thing that I guess I still don't quite understand would be, you said that the point is to kind of get the victim back to where he was originally, but like how does scaring the victim or the criminal, or even maybe killing him or taking his TV, really get the victim back to square one? Because
the way I think that's a very good follow-up question. Look, suppose Bill Gates is the murderer or grabs a TV, and now you say to Bill Gates, well, you have to pay $10,000. Well, Bill Gates is going to just say, well, that's chump change. It's I give waitresses bigger tips than that. For a $100 meal, I give $10,000 tip. It's not going to really work. So there's a little bit of utilitarianism in here, but I think it's deontologically justified. What we're trying to do is establish the maximum that the heirs of the victim, or the victim in a case of non-murder, can impose. So what we're going to do with Bill Gates is we're going to say, okay, Billy boy, you stole a TV, you got to give back a TV, fine, and let's say there are no costs of capture, and now you're going to play a little Russian roulette. Now, it's true that the Russian roulette isn't going to satisfy the victim. However, the victim and Bill Gates, I hope Bill Gates doesn't mind me picking on him. I'm just picking on him because he's rich. I'm not implying that he's a thief or anything like that. Now, Bill Gates has to play Russian roulette, and let's say he has to have 3 bullets and 100 chambers, namely a 3% chance of death. And Bill isn't too happy about them apples, and Bill goes to the victim, Daniel, and he says, hey, let me out of this. And now Daniel can say, okay, I'll let you out of it, but you're not paying any $10,000. You're going to be paying me, $1 billion or some big sum. So this is a way of establishing the maximum that the victim can get out of the perpetrator. And so it is a way of helping the victim, sort of indirectly.
But, I mean, isn't that in a way helping the victim like an extortionist is helped? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, sure. We're justified in having extortion against criminals. Namely, it's justified to use violence against criminals, whether in self-defense or in punishment for them. Extortion sounds bad, but you know, I'll bite the bullet or whatever, or grab the bull by the horns. Yeah, you're justified in using violence or extortion against criminals, just not against innocent people.
And so I guess it would come to another issue, like under the non-aggression principle. I've been under the understanding that you can only use self-defense if it's like an equal amount of aggression that was put towards you. Right, if McLean punches me, I can't kill McLean in self-defense.
I see. No, I wouldn't agree with that exactly. I think it's close. Daniel, aren't these kids bright? I mean, they're just high school kids, and they're really giving me the run for my money. This is wonderful.
College makes people dumber, not smarter. So.
Right, don't go to college. No, come to Loyola. That'll be different. Look, I think what you have to do is defend yourself in the gentlest manner possible, consistent with stopping the perpetrator. Now, if McLean is punching you, Sidney, or in the act of punching you,
right.
And you can stop him with a net, say.
Yeah, sure.
And you also have a bazooka there, which will just blow him in half. I think you're obligated to use the net if you can, with equal certainty, stop him.
Okay, yeah.
On the other hand, you know, if the bazooka is a better shot at it, you know, you just blow him away because he's not allowed to be punching you.
Right.
What you get here is sometimes with trespass. Somebody's trespassing on your lawn. What you do is you don't shoot him. You say, "Sir, do you realize you're on my lawn?" And if the guy says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you didn't have a sign," and he gets off, well, then, you know, what the heck?
Right.
But if he starts giving you lip and saying, "Well, I don't care about private property rights, I'm a socialist," then what you have to do is, in the gentlest manner possible, get him off. You don't start by shooting him, but you maybe take a rake and sort of push him away. And if he grabs the rake and tries to hit you with the rake, then you shoot him, because now he's doing more than mere trespass. So I think that you're entitled to use deadly force during the act, because you don't know what's going to happen. You know, you get these young men with a hoodie, and you don't know what they're going to do. And if you're much bigger and stronger than him, if it's just a kid, you know, you don't want to kill him. But if he's got a knife, you know, you don't have to just use a knife. You can use a gun too. Afterward, I think then you go by libertarian punishment theory, which might not be as draconian.
Okay. Blah, blah, blah. So if we were to accept that you could, you know, use force, the least harmful possible in order to defend yourself, then and couldn't I use the same kind of logic to say, well, once you are, you know, stolen against or whatever, once you are a victim of a crime, you should use the least amount of aggression possible to put yourself back at square one, which would be, you know, taking the TV and cause a capture and blah blah blah.
Well, first of all, I think that there's a difference between the act of crime and afterward.
Right.
During the act of crime, I think you're entitled to do a lot more to defend yourself because it's very uncertain. Afterward, when the guy's in jail, you know, it's different. Plus, I think that the force or the 2 teeth plus cost of capture and scaring is the least that you're entitled to. I think that's the most gentlest way. You could do worse. You could, you know, I'm a moderate. That's why they call me Walter Moderate Block. There are some extremists who say, well, if anyone steals anything, death penalty, namely 100 bullets and 100 chambers. And I'm not that extreme. I'm willing to, you know, have fewer bullets and more chambers depending upon how bad the crime was. Why don't you let McLean ask a question now? You've had 3 or 4.
Go.
Yeah, no, I did have a question about
And if you don't let him, he's going to punch you.
about like libertarian law and how like natural law would work.
Daniel, I can see Sidney, but I can't see McLean. Can you get them both in the picture? There you go. Okay, great.
Okay, so like about natural law and how I've read a lot on like Mises about like mutualist communities and how people think that they might like form on their own accord with like for example a Sharia law community, but then like how do children in a community like that where the laws might not necessarily be only like non-aggression, how would children in that be independent of their parents and like be able to choose, or are they more property in that sense, and they're just like stuck where they're born until they're independent enough to leave?
That's a real good question. That's a tough one. Children are always a difficulty for every political philosophy, and libertarianism is no exception. Children are difficult to wrap your mind around. My view is if there's child abuse, then the child can be taken away from the parent by the hopefully private police, and if not, then by the public police. I mean, if there's somebody who's whipping his kid practically to death because the kid, I don't know, did something, didn't drink his milk or something, and I think it would be entitled for the forces of law and order, whoever they are, to go in and take that kid away from the parent and put the parent in jail for child abuse. But it's very subjective. You know, what's child abuse? I just wrote a paper about circumcision, the Jewish practice, which other people engage in. Is this child abuse or not? Well, you know, there's a gray area. There's a continuum problem. The continuum problem is, you know, we know that if you go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, you're a statutory rapist. If you go to bed with a 25-year-old woman, you're not, as long as she agrees. And what about a 15-year-old girl or a 14 or a 16? You know, where do you go from 5 to 25? It's a continuum. And similarly about punching, you know, how close does the fist have to be to the nose? I mean, right now, you guys are on the West Coast, I'm on the Gulf of Mexico, and I go like this. And you send over what do you call it, a drone to kill me? Well, you know, it really wasn't much of a threat. I can't reach you. You know, I mean, I'm very strong, but I'm not that strong. Well, how close do I have to be? So there's a continuum problem, and there's no right answer. It's a gray area. There are extremes, and you know, I think that the clitorectomy that the people impose on girls, where they cut the vagina in some way, clitoris or something like that, I think that's child abuse. I just co-authored a paper on circumcision, male circumcision, and I take the view that that is also child abuse. But I'm less sure about that than I am clitorectomy. I think clitorectomy is a much clearer case that if they do that, they're engaging in child abuse, and the child or the children should be taken away from the parents. That is if they live in our area where, you know, where our laws operate. But suppose they live in, I don't know where, Saudi Arabia or somewhere in Africa. Should the U.S. government go over there and shape them up? Well, not really. As a libertarian, I'm sort of a Ron Paul fan, and I think that to the extent that the U.S. government does anything, it should just protect protect us, and not go make the world safe for democracy or safe for children or safe for anything. Just defend us. And if people want to go over there, like the Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Civil War, where individuals went over to Spain to fight Franco, God bless them, let them go. Stop clitorectomies or whatever they're doing, which is evil. You know, forced marriages is another form of child abuse. So that would be my answer to your very good question, McLean. Do you have a follow-up, or?
Maybe not quite as related, but sort of like, do you envision mutualist communities being part of a libertarian society, like within more of a natural rights kind of, or like framework, or like would there be laws that exist in some areas and not in others, although the like principle of non-aggression would exist everywhere?
Well, take voluntary sadomasochism. The sadist beats up the masochist, and let's say there's a society of sadomasochists, right? And they're all adults, so we don't get in the children problem. Well, I think that would be okay.
Yeah.
In one of my writings, I even talk about Murder Park. Murder Park is a ball field where the walls are very thick, and everyone is given a pistol and 6 bullets and told they can shoot anyone else in there for 50 minutes, and then the bell rings at 50 minutes, and then you have to stop shooting, and then we come and we cart out the dead bodies. We give everyone more ammunition. We put more people in there, and then another 50 minutes they shoot each other. Well, that's sort of a weird mutualist society, or a commune, or a kibbutz, or whatever. See, capitalism can encompass voluntary socialism, whereas socialism can't encompass laissez-faire capitalism. So I think that there's a bifurcation here, or a bias in favor of capitalism and against socialism. But voluntary socialism, hippie commune, would be just as legitimate as any other kind of organization. We thin libertarians believe the non-aggression axiom, but consenting adults can override this. Look, boxing. We have boxing. You know, people get into a boxing match and they punch each other. They're not allowed to bite ears. You're not allowed to punch below the belt. But if you punch above the belt, the guy who gets punched can't say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, stop! This is assault and battery. I'm suing this guy," because they've agreed to be punched or punch or be punched.
Right. What was that? I can't remember.
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, me and McLean talk about this a lot because I am personally on the fence between like minarchism and anarchism, and he's pretty set on anarchism. And we always talk about this, it's like, so let's assume, magically it was great and we had a libertarian society now and the government wasn't in our business. And, we as libertarians, we've been always discussing, what defines non-aggression and blah, 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 and what defines aggression. And so we had this like understanding of what aggression was. But then there's, different groups of people that want to do different things. Maybe some want to be like, voluntary communist society, Sharia law society, blah, blah, blah. And then you find that, maybe even, between two different cities, they had a, difference of opinion of what defined aggression or something like that, right? And because there's no government to enforce the law, they have to decide them on their own. But to me, I could see that leading, because if we're to accept that there's like, one law of like non-aggression, then if somebody disagreed, then they would be some form of aggressing against another people, and then I've always argued that could, I've always called it like ANCAP Rome, where it's like, a group of, a society that had all these opinions end up becoming a oppressive government again because they started to just have different disagreements, and eventually people started to accept the aggression of whatever it was, and then people eventually couldn't leave, and then you have a state again amongst this like anarchy because the laws were not defined and you couldn't really intervene on somebody if they had poor definitions of aggression.
Okay, well, you're really asking two questions, the way I see it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the one question you're asking is how stable would anarchism be? Would it evolve back into statism? And the other question is how would, under an anarchist society, issues be settled if there was a dispute between, say, a member of Community A and a member of Community B? So,
assuming the Community A and Community B had sort of different understanding of what the law was.
Well, you could even assume that they have the same understanding, that they're all against aggression. It's just that in Community A, I said I sent you 10 cows, and you say, well, you only got 9. The 10th one was sick or something like that, and now we're having a dispute, right? So the dispute need not be over aggression. And in much easier cases, we all agree we're against aggression. We're all libertarians. Only I say I sent you 10 healthy cows, and you say 9.
Okay.
And now, what do we do?
Right.
And what you do is you invite me to your court.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, what? Go to your court? What are you, crazy? It's your brother or your mother or somebody.
Yeah.
And I say, well, let's go to my court. And you say roughly the same thing. Your court be damned, or whatever you're going to say. And now there are 4 possible cases. I go to my court and I invite you, and you decline, or you accept, or whatever. And my court finds in my favor, and your court finds in your favor.
Right.
It's possible that both courts will find in my favor, in which case it's case closed, because we both agreed to be bound by whatever the court decides. And if both courts agree with me, then tough on you. If both courts agree with you, and these courts have got police forces too, well, then it's tough on you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's possible that my court will agree with you and your court will agree with me, but let's forget about that.
Okay.
Let's suppose that your court agrees with you and my court agrees with me.
Okay, yeah.
Well, now what? Ayn Rand says, well, blank out. Well, Murray Rothbard and David Friedman and several other, Hans Hoppe and other anarchist theoreticians don't go with blank out. They say, well, look, there are two kinds of courts. One is legitimate courts, and the other is bandit courts. What are legitimate? What's the difference? Bandit courts are courts that don't have any contracts with anyone else, don't anticipate this, and if they anticipate it, they say, screw you, screw, what is it that Cartman says? Screw you guys, screw you guys, screw you guys, Cartman of South Park.
Yeah.
Those are bandit courts. Whereas legitimate courts will anticipate this, and they'll say, look, fellow legitimate court, if ever we are on opposite sides of an issue, we'll go to Daniel. Daniel will be our judge. And we obligated ourselves to abide by what Daniel said because we think he's a fair judge, and that'll be it. And the point is that legitimacy is very important. Jeff Hummel, a friend of mine, always says the pen is mightier than the sword, which you wouldn't think. I mean, the pen is this big, the sword's a lot bigger, but the pen determines which direction the swords are pointed. And legitimate courts would have legitimacy, and people would respect them, and bandit courts would be just hounded out of society. And what would happen is that the bandit courts would have to fight everyone. They'd have to fight other bandit courts, and they'd have to fight legitimate courts. Legitimate courts would only have to fight bandit courts because if they were on an opposite side of a decision from another legitimate court, they would mediate it or arbitrate it with a Supreme Court judge. So the point is that these bandit courts would be ruled out, and you're in my dispute. I said I gave you 10 good cows. You said only 9. Well, that's how it would be settled. Okay. Would it be perfect? No, but I think it would be better. You know, the joke is the economist was asked, "How is your wife?" And his answer was, "Compared to what?" Well, you know, compared to what? Would free market courts be perfect? No, we're imperfect people, but the way you would get to be a judge would be based on propriety and based on wisdom and experience, whereas now the way to get to be a judge in many countries is you're a politician and you give up your seat for the prime minister or something, you get to be a judge, or that's the way you get appointed now. So we would have better judges, not perfect ones because they're human beings, but better ones.
Mm-hmm. May I interject for a sec, if you don't mind?
Please.
Well, there's a very good book called The Enterprise of the Law by Bruce Benson, and he talks about the history of law. And in the book, there was voluntary tribes where you would agree to be bound by some tribe leader, and you could always say, I don't want to be bound by this leader, and go to a different one. But if you would, let's say, you know, I violate your rights, and you say, I don't care, I'm not going to go to court. Well, what would happen was, not that they would drag you to court, but they would say, this guy is not even willing to defend himself from an accusation. Therefore, we are not going to defend him if he claims victimization in the future, and we are going to make it known among and publicize it. And now with the internet, information travels much quicker, that this guy is an outlaw, and anyone is free to commit acts of violence against him, and we're not going to come to defend him because he's not being cooperative. That is a very good incentive, without even having to drag people into jail, to get people to want to show up. And this idea also of, well, let's say anarchy, you have anarchy and it turns into a government. Well, that's like saying, I'm afraid you're going to steal my wallet, so in order to ensure you won't steal my wallet, here it is. You know? If the worst thing about anarchy is that it turns into a state, I say we take our chances.
And we're no worse off than we are now anyway. I think that's a very good interjection, and I'm glad I suggested that. You feel free, Daniel, to pipe in, because you're one of us. You're one of the crowd. Bruce, I mentioned David Friedman, Hans Hoppe, Murray Rothbard. I didn't mention Bruce Benson, but I certainly agree with Daniel that Bruce is one of the chief theoreticians of libertarian anarchism, or anarcho-capitalism, whatever you want to call it. He is magnificent. Joe Peden did something on ancient Ireland, and David Friedman did something on ancient Iceland. Maybe I've got that backward, I'm not sure. So there are a lot of people that have written a lot of good stuff on this, and I'm just sort of regurgitating this stuff with the two courts. But I think that Daniel's interjection of Bruce Benson's theory is very apropos.
That was really good. Okay. What else?
So I think something we talked with you about with Mr. LeGride was like the problem of homesteading, and like to what extent can you homestead a plot of land just by like making a fence around it. And our example is like if Columbus discovers America and builds a fence around the whole thing, he doesn't own the whole thing because he hasn't homesteaded very much of it. He's only homesteaded the fence. But then, like, to what extent does someone who wants to maintain a forest in its natural state rather than like giving it to logging companies, how can someone do that by keeping it as it is but still intermixing their labor with it?
And then your reply was, you take care of the worm or whatever, the bugs, and you let the bugs go into the forest like a cow in the graze or whatever, and then therefore you own that forest. And what made me think of is like if you retracted it a little and just said, I have a home, and I have a home and I have a front yard, and say I'm a hippie and I don't like to mess with my front yard, but I have a fence around my front yard, and so if I don't mess with the bugs or anything to let them in my front yard, can McLean come and do something to my untended front yard and say, well, you never actually did anything to your front yard, therefore this front yard was unowned?
Well, these are very, very good questions again, and my answer is, well, first let me explain this a little bit more for the audience that don't know about the bugs and the cows.
Yeah.
Let me just take 2 minutes on that, and then I'll my answer will be in terms of continuums again. The issue is, suppose you want to have a forest untouched by human hands. You want to have a nature preserve. Just nature. How do you get to own it if the only way to own things is with homesteading? And the answer was, well, you don't have to homestead the land yourself. For example, if you're a cattle rancher, you can homestead the range with your cattle. So if you can do that, then what you could do is grab a worm or a bug from this nature preserve and I don't know, care for it and feed it and get to own it, homestead it, and then sort of throw it or put it back into the nature preserve and let the bug or the worm homestead it for you. Okay, so that's one problem. How do you get to own and by the way, I have a paper on that where I co-authored it with Michael Edelstein, another friend of mine. And if any of you are interested in these articles, email me. I'm at wblock@loyno.edu, WBLOCK@LOYNO, Louis Oliver Yellow New Orleans.edu for education, and I'll send you some of these articles which you might be interested in. Okay, so that's how you get to own a nature preserve, which seems to be a contradiction, but I think we can sort of sneak into that. Then the other question that you're asking is, well, how intensive does the homesteading have to be? Can you put in a plant and own every square foot? Well, how about every square yard? How about one corn plant and you own the whole acre? How about a whole square mile? Or how about the whole United States?
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to put a fence in there. You just put one corn plant somewhere and you say, well, I own the whole thing. How intensive does it have to be? And this is a continuum problem. And the way Murray Rothbard answers it, it's based on, I don't know, the style or the culture or the traditions of the place. For example, east of the Mississippi in the United States, the land is more fertile, so you have to plant more intensively. Whereas west of the Mississippi, it's drier, so you don't have to plant quite as intensively. On the moon, which will be even more arid, or Mars, I don't know what Mars will be like. Maybe there'll be water there, but even less intensively than in the desert or in the west of the Mississippi. But there has to be some sort of rule of reason. You don't have to put a plant every square inch east of the Mississippi, but maybe every square foot or something like that. I'm not sure of the technical amount, but again, it's a continuum problem, and there's no one right answer. You can't say, well, it's a square yard, or 2 square yards, or whatever. But the drier it is, the less intensive you have to do it. Now, with regard to your front lawn, I mean, if the front lawn is 10,000 acres, well, that's too big. You have to do something there. Otherwise, the hippies can come in and grab your land. Or rather, you're the hippie and you have 10,000 square miles or 10,000 acres. That's too much. On the other hand, if you have, I don't know, 10 foot by 10 foot, you know, give me a break. It's right near your house. It's surrounding your house. You don't really have to homestead that because you walk in and out of it, and you throw garbage there. You're a hippie or whatever. So we can give you a break, even maybe 10 yards by 10 yards. But as you get bigger and bigger, your grasp of the land gets less and less for a given amount of homesteading. And I can't say, well, here's the cutoff point. Not one more inch, or like when I said it's 2.0 teeth. There I gave a cutoff point. Here I can't. Here it's based on the culture, and my assumption is, if you have a small garden in the front yard and the backyard and a little bit on the side of your house, that's reasonable. You don't have to homestead it. You put a fence around it and it's yours. But as it gets bigger, you have to do more to make your claim good.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. I don't really have anything more about like ownership of homesteading and stuff. Something or another issue that we disagree on, and something that I'm torn on, is intellectual property, which I believe you probably have a good explanation for your opinions, but I feel like it would just be such a giant departure from how the market currently works that I just don't really see or envision exactly how an economy would function the same or as effectively as ours does, although that's not saying much maybe. But
okay, well, here I am a big fan of Stephan Kinsella.
Yeah.
He wrote an article in 2001, I think, in the Journal of Libertarian Studies, which I think is just magnificent. And I'm going to sort of put what he said in my own words. He won't mind because he doesn't believe in intellectual property, so he won't sue me. And he's a very good friend of mine, so he's not going to sue me anyway. Let me divide my remarks into deontology and utilitarianism. Deontology is what are the rights of it, and utilitarianism is would we have any inventions if we didn't have patents and copyrights? Would we have any new pharmaceuticals? Would we have any new movies or plays or new books if a person couldn't get a copyright or a patent on it? Okay, first of all, let me talk about deontology or rights. Patents are I think very bad because, first of all, I own this pen, and what they're saying is that patents are like ideas are like pens. You can own them. Well, if you can own them, I own this pen forever, and I can give it to my kid, and he give it to his kid, and we can have this pen for 5,000 years. So what is this thing about the patent only lasts for 25 years or only lasts for the death of the inventor in 50 years or whatever? It should last forever, right? Shouldn't it? I mean, if it's the same thing as a pen or a shirt or something like that, then it should last forever. Well, if that's true, then we have what Hans Hoppe would call a performative contradiction. Namely, the person who favors intellectual property can't speak. For example, suppose I'm a person who favors intellectual property, and I say, I favor intellectual property. That's 4 words. I favor intellectual property. Well, where did the word I come from? It came from Mr. I. How can I use the word I if Mr. I owns it? Favor, it came from Mr. Favor. I can't speak. So the point is that if you really believe in this stuff, you're stuck in a performative contradiction. You have to shut up, which is not a very good recommendation for a theory that you can't even espouse it. Second point that Kinsella would make is, look, the reason we have private property, the reason we have to have property is so we can figure out who has a right to do what with what. Namely, this is my pen, I have a right to use it, and you guys can't. And the point is, if I'm using it, you guys can't. Right? It's scarce. It's a scarce good. But ideas are not scarce once they're out there. E equals mc squared, or the Pythagorean theorem, or 2 + 2 = 4, or how to make a bicycle, or girl A puts her hair up in a ponytail. And girl B sees the girl A in a ponytail and says, wow, that's a great idea. It looks better. It keeps the hair out of my face. I'll put my hair in a ponytail. Girl A still has a ponytail. Girl B didn't take girl A's ponytail away from her. They can both have it. Namely, when you copy it, you still have it. Whereas if you took my pen, then I don't have it anymore. So the point of property is given that it's scarce, we have to divvy it up. But when things are not scarce, we don't have to divvy them up. We can both use E equals mc squared or Pythagorean theorem or whatever it is. So I think deontologically it's clear that you have no right to prevent other people from looking at you, I mean, and seeing that you're riding a bicycle and then copying the bicycle, and now they have a bicycle, but you still have your bicycle. Okay, so much for deontology. Now the question is, will we have any new inventions like bicycles or like computer code or pharmaceutical drugs or whatever it is, or books? And here, to me, it's an empirical issue. It's not hard and cut and dried and clear. It's an empirical issue. And I think I agree that when the patent system started, probably patents were good. Namely that they, you know, if you told people if you invent the bicycle, you can have the bicycle forever, at least a case can be made for it. I don't even think it's true then, but a case can be made for it that it's good because you give incentive to inventors or to writers or to musicians or whoever it is. But as the patents start piling up after 50 years or 100 years of patents, it's almost the opposite is clear, because nowadays if I want to invent something, I have to make sure I'm not violating anyone else's patents. And people create patents for the purpose not of having a new toy or a new invention, but for the purpose of cashing in on anyone else who violates their patents. So without patents, if you want to invent something, you just go directly, you invent it. With patents, you have to sort of wiggle around and go up and down around patents, other people's patents, so it's very unclear that it's beneficial after there are many patents out there. Secondly, a lot of time and effort on the part of very smart people, inventors, lawyers, who could be doing something else. Instead, they're fighting over, did you violate my patent or not? They could have been out there inventing stuff, and they're not doing it. And then you have all sorts of empirical stuff. I don't know, who was it, Haydn, that made 105 symphonies or something like that, and not one of them was patented, and he kept creating them, and he benefited from them. Look, I just came out with a book, Defending the Undefendable 2.
Yeah, I actually just bought that. I'm about to read.
Oh, good, bless you.
You bought it? You didn't make a copy of it?
Suppose, now look, if McLean says Defending the Undefendable 2, written by McLean Freed, then he is engaging in fraud. And this would be non-kosher. This would be illegitimate. But you don't have to do that, McLean. All you have to do is say, this is Defending the Undefendable 2, written by Walter Block, but brought to you, published by McLean Freed. And let's say that I'm a better writer than you, but you're a better marketer than I am. So I can't sell my way out of a paper bag, and, you know, I sell 10 copies, whereas you can sell 1 million copies because you're much better at marketing. Did you hurt me? Well, yeah, I don't get any royalties. You get all the royalties. I get, you know, royalties off 10 books that I sold. You get royalties off 1 million books, but what you did is you put my name out there. Now people are going to want to come and ask me to give a speech for them, and I charge for speeches sometimes. So the demand curve from me as a speaker will shift out to the right. Namely, you're helping me. It's as if you're my agent almost. Yeah, you're taking a bunch of stupid royalties. You know, the book costs 10 or 20 bucks. You don't get much royalties. But now a lot of people want to hear my speeches. Or let's say I have a band, and I, you know, have a new song. And again, you don't say it's your song, but you say this is Walter Block's song as brought to you by McLean Freed. And again, you get the royalties, but I get a lot of invitations to be a live band at concerts or whatever. So you're really helping me. Now let's take another one. I invent the cure for cancer. I'll let you in on the secret. It's 1/3 raisins, 1/3 chalk, and 1/3 salt. You mix them up, and that's it. That's the cure for cancer. Now, under patents, and by the way, Wilbur Wright and Orville Wright, when they invented the airplane, they spent the rest of their lives fighting over patents instead of improving the airplane. Okay, I just came up with the cure for cancer, and under patents, I'm the only one that can do it, and I get all the royalties, and I'll make a lot of money. But suppose there are no patents. Will I get anything? Yeah, I'll get something because look, I invented it, and all you guys can do is reverse engineer it. Namely, buy it for yourselves at a reasonably high price, and then go to a chemist or become a chemist and try to figure out, how is it made. And meanwhile, let's say it takes you 6 months to figure it out. Well, for 6 months, I'm curing cancer, and I'm making a ton of money for 6 months. And now you guys are bringing your cancer cure online after 6 months, and nobody trusts you. Everybody trusts me because my cancer thing worked, and yours, you say it's just as good, but people are still coming to me. So I might not make as much as if I had a monopoly patent over it, but I'll still get some financial incentive in doing it. So to sum up my answer to this, I think that Stefan Kinsella is absolutely right that the deontology for intellectual property is dead from the neck up. I mean, you can't speak. You have to shut up. And what's this limit on it? And I think even from the pragmatic or utilitarian point of view, patents and copyrights and trademarks and all the other intellectual property are really highly problematic.
May I interject also again?
Sure.
If you don't mind. Yeah. Now, I disagree with Kinsella in the sense that I support trademarks because, to me, not allowing that is a form of fraud. If I invent something and I call it Coca-Cola and someone else is allowed to, copy my idea, but if they call it Coca-Cola, that's a form of fraud because they're expecting my Coca-Cola and someone else is inventing an identical product. So that's fraud. So I would say when it comes to trademarks,
Does Stefan say that
he's against all intellectual property? In fact, your example where he would say, Stefan Kinsella, that you could even make a book called Defending the Undefendable 2, and say you wrote it, even though you didn't write it.
Well, I think that would be fraud. Certainly.
Well, I agree. I think trademarks are a form of fraud. But
anyway. I'll have to read that section over again. Make sure that Stefan says that. I mean, like I'm an academic, and when my students write term papers for me, I tell them no plagiarism. If you put somebody else's product and you sign it, you get an F or you get kicked out of school. If I were to plagiarize, I would lose my tenure. And I think justifiably so. I mean, if Daniel, you wrote a paper co-authored with McLean and Sidney, and I said I wrote it, that would be very non-kosher. I think that would be, in effect, theft. And I'll have to reread that section of Stefan.
Well, also, just to say this quickly, if you don't mind, I mean, a lot of the arguments in support of intellectual property really undermine the entire market system, because one of the arguments that people will say, well, first of all, it's the very idea is crazy because they're basically saying unless we allow a monopoly, there's not going to be incentives for people to invent, which that is a contradiction in of itself. So unless we restrict competition, we're not going to have competition. The only way we can have competition is if we have a monopoly. That in itself is an oxymoron. But a lot of these arguments really apply to everything. Look, there are identical products in many ways all the time. Ivory soap, Dove soap, RC Cola, Pepsi. The way people make their money is through advertising and marketing. To make products that are pretty much identical through the use of marketing, and that's how they attract customers. Also, being the first person to invent something gives you an advantage, because people are habitual and they don't like to change in midstream. That's why often, presidents who are so awful will get a second term. So when it comes to intellectual property, if we really take the argument that, well, if without having intellectual property, people are going to steal other people's ideas, and therefore people won't invent. Well, we can't allow any market. If I open up a pizza restaurant and someone says, that's a good idea, I'm going to open up a pizza restaurant too. Well, now he's stealing my customers, right? So we can't allow that. So this is really just an excuse to get monopoly protection. Lysander Spooner was at least consistent because he advocated intellectual property in perpetuity. the only one to my knowledge who did. But it's really just an excuse to, you're one of the things, and then I'll shut up, that people say is, well, you are depriving people of profits. I make an invention to profit, and I'm depriving someone of profits. Well, you own something. Someone can only steal something of yours which you own currently. Someone can't steal something of mine today which I'm not going to have in 10 years. Because I might not have it in 10 years, and the future is certain. So if you say someone has a right to profit, you are saying that someone has a right to other people's income. Namely, profit is getting income of other people. And if you have the right to profit, you have the right not only to prohibit all competition, because people are stealing your customers, you can make the case, but you are saying that you're entitled to the money of other people before they hand it over to you, and that, I think, is very problematic.
Yeah, you have a right to profit or loss, but not to profit. It's almost the end of the hour, so if you have another quick question or so?
Yeah. You go. No, you go.
Then really quick, I read you wrote it with other people, the economic reconciliation, economics and the environment, something like that, economics and environment and reconciliation, and you talk about how, like, or I think it was Rothbard's article where he talks about the car issue, like, there's thousands of cars and you want to sue them for pollution, and you can't obviously sue every person, and so you sue the road, and then the road then raise the prices.
Let me interrupt you. You sue the road owner.
Oh, yeah. Sue the road owner, yeah. Yeah. And my question was, I guess, it makes a lot of sense to, have that happen, but like ethically, like in the issue of natural rights, is it really the road owner's fault that you are being polluted? Because in a way, he's just kind of a catalyst for them being there.
That's an interesting question. All these questions are very, very important questions. They show no respect. You should listen. No, I'm kidding. It's right because I say it. I think you have an interesting point there, but in New Orleans, where I live, they're having this issue about noise on Bourbon Street, and any one person, if he yells, can't make much noise, but if you get 300 people and they're all screaming, then they can make a lot of noise.
Right.
Any one person with a car, I mean, the amount of pollution that car creates is de minimis, they call it in law, a very small amount. The problem comes when you get 100,000 cars. So you could make a case that the road owner is aiding and abetting pollution by gathering people together. I see your point, but certainly from a practical point of view, it'd be crazy to sue each company, each individual car. You might as well start suing each of us for breathing out, because we breathe out carbon dioxide, which is problematic. And each car owner might be able to say, well, I'm not doing too much pollution. But when you get them all together, so from a practical point of view, I think Murray's point is, absolutely correct.
Right.
From a deontological point of view, can't we say that the road owner is aiding and abetting these people? Because without him, they could, they would just have to sit home and they couldn't ride much and they wouldn't pollute much. So he's sort of at least helping. Now, he's doing more than inciting. Aiding, there's a difference between inciting and aiding and abetting. When you incite, you go burn, rape, loot, kill. That's it. You just say that, and idiots go out and do it. It's their fault, not your fault. Right. But what Mike Tyson and Spike Lee did with, what's his name, Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, they said, why is this guy still alive? Reach out and touch him. And then they started giving his address. They gave the wrong address, which is a whole other issue. But there it was more incitement. And we libertarians are against, no, sorry, it was not more incitement. It was more aiding and abetting. You're being part of the criminal apparatus. So I think you can make a case that the road owner is not just merely inciting. He's not saying everyone pollute. He's aiding and abetting. He's helping. He's part of the criminal conspiracy gang of polluting, getting people's property or getting dirt in the air into other people's lungs and onto their property. So I think you're making a very, very good point, and I'm a little uneasy with my answer, but that's the best I can do right off the top of my head. I've never heard of that objections, and I've been around for a while, and I've heard many objections. So, and this isn't the first one that I haven't heard and that I got from you guys, so I really appreciate your contribution because that's part of making libertarianism stronger, namely trying to criticize it from a reasonable point of view.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked the question.
Very good question.
Well, I mean, I guess along the same subject, couldn't you then say that, like, you know, the seller of a gun is aiding and abetting the person who uses the gun to shoot somebody?
Well, I probably want to say there's a disanalogy there, although that's a good response. I think there's a disanalogy. The owner of the gun, if he sells to a kid, okay, you got some sort of point there, but you know, kids are always a problem for all political philosophy.
Right.
But if you sell a person a gun, you're not really, what's the word I'm looking for, directly responsible for whatever he does. I mean, if you go there, then you might say, well, how about the restaurant, McDonald's serves breakfast to the criminal gang?
Right.
Now, if the criminal gang didn't get breakfast or shoes, they couldn't commit a crime, right? Yeah. They're not going to commit a crime barefoot, and they're not going to commit a crime, say, without breakfast. And yet, you don't want to indict the shoemaker or the restaurant owner for what the gang does. So I don't think you want to indict the manufacturer of the gun for what the criminal does. I mean, you know, every once in a while, somebody starts slashing with a knife and starts killing people. What are we going to do? Call for no knives? And how about, you know, long fingernails? You know, somebody could kill somebody with, or a fist, you know.
Or cars.
Or cars. I mean, you know, we should chop everyone's fists off right at the wrist, but then you can sort of get them with your elbow, so chop off elbows too. I mean,
you should probably just kill everyone to ensure no one murders.
That's it. Hey.
Okay.
Well, take care, guys. It's 3 o'clock, and I've allotted 1 hour for this, and it's been fun. And if you got more questions that I didn't answer, I'm sure Daniel had enough fun on this. He would be happy to host us again.
Anytime.
Oh, no, yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem. Nice meeting you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, have a good day.
Have a good one.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.